So tonight, Turning Greenwood is going to be our presentation. Tom Gifford, if you want to come up here and tell us a little bit about yourself before you get started, and we'll turn the floor over to Tom.
So can you guys hear me, or is it live?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm Tom Gifford. I live here in Charlotte over in the South Park neighborhood, and I'm a self-taught turner. I probably been serious about it for maybe 10 or 12 years now. Started out as a woodworker, actually did a vocational program in school for 4 years, and they taught us just about enough to be dangerous about everything. And so lathe work and things like that was one subject that we did study a little bit on. Learned how to make a baseball bat was the project. But anyhow, went through life and didn't spend a lot of time doing that just because life gets in the way. And so when I retired, I decided to go back to the lathe and have been enjoying it since. I primarily like to turn bowls. I do other things, but not a lot. That's just going to lead me into the rest of the story here. I'd like tonight to talk about green wood turning and the steps that I go through to promote that and find the wood and how I do that and things like that. So, I'm not the end all source on this stuff. I just, through life, I've learned what I need to know to make myself happy. Locating turning stock. It's funny. I hear a chainsaw start up, and I'm going to go see where that chainsaw is running, and I'm going to go find those guys that are cutting that wood. And normally, if it's a tree company or something like that, they're going to give you more wood than you know what to do with. And you buy the guys some lunch, and they'll load it for you, and just be ready to take a whole bunch of it because they don't have to pay to dispose of it. And then storms. I get a lot of wood from storms. There was a tornado a couple of years ago that came right through this neighborhood. And picked up a ton of wood there because it was all being trashed. It was just being chipped up and thrown away. And it was a shame. And I went and found like 2 truckloads. And then for weeks after that, as I was driving through the community, you would find on an empty lot where these guys that were doing the tree work dumped in the middle of the night. And the pieces of cherry that I have with me tonight that we're going to demonstrate on was from one of those places. There was a cherry tree that easily was that diameter, black cherry. And some of the pieces were so big that even cut in half, I couldn't pick them up myself and put them in the truck. It made me crazy to leave them laying there. So, you got to kind of be aware. And another thing that I do is that over the years, I've gotten to know tree service people. And it's funny, you give a guy a little something and he'll call you up when they're cutting down a walnut tree or something like that. And so they keep you on your list. You just got to be ready to go to get it when they call. But that's another very, very good source. And then, the trees that we take down, I had a nice maple tree that was in trouble, and I had got some nice wood from that just recently. So the wood is out there, and it's out there for free. So, don't go spending a lot of money buying wood because you can find it very readily if you just look around a little bit. When you're looking at a log that you're thinking about harvesting some wood from a piece of timber, I kind of look for a tree that's maybe growing around a little bit, got a little curve in it to where when I go and section that piece of the log out to make bowls or whatever out of, the grain's going in an unusual pattern. And so that I can go in there and have a bowl that's just not symmetrical. The grains going one way or the other. I also look for, naturally burls on anything that you can incorporate into the bowl to add, some more design feature to it. And also, crotches and things like that. I've had mixed results with. Sometimes they're a real true win and you do real well, and sometimes they explode on the lathe or just crack in half and fall apart. You've got to be ready. A rule of thumb that I've found is that you've got to be ready to where when you cut that log in half to start turning bowls, you got to be ready to turn those bowls and finish them at least to a rough state where you can get them sealed up. Because I've had bowls that I've started too late in the day and couldn't finish getting it roughed out or whatever, and come back in the morning and it be in two pieces. Some really wood that might have had some unusual stresses in it or something like that. So I make it a rule of thumb to never cut anything in half before I'm ready to be able to turn it that day, because a lot of times they'll just do, crazy stuff on you. So with that said, when I get the bowls cut to what I determine what I want, we all look at a piece of wood and we say, I'm going to get this out of it. And it's been my experience that probably 6 out of 10 times it doesn't happen. We have either a design modification, which means you stuck the chisel in the wrong place and it blew a piece of wood off and it got smaller, or the wood didn't want to cooperate with what you wanted to do with it. And so, you just got to be, I think that's the thing that I enjoy the most about turning, is that it's a changing environment and you got to be thinking about it all the time and reacting to it and rethinking your plan. And it just, I find that enjoyable. Next thing to talk about, let's not leave a log laying on the ground like I do, because I never got to it too long, because you're going to lose it. It's going to get punky and get rotten, and you're just going to throw it away. It's better to find someone to give it to than it is to just let it lay there, because it doesn't hold up well at all. Even if you put sealer on them over time, I'm talking a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. It's not even good for firewood anymore. It's going to the landfill. Another thing that I look at when I look at a log is what I think is the best access to cut it on from the, because you really don't want to have the pith in your projects. And if you do consider having the piths in your project, you need to take special care to seal those up really good and keep them from splitting on you. They want to crack, they want to warp, they want to do all kinds of things. I have some demonstration, or some examples, I should say. Of what a finished bowl, after it's green and dried. This was perfectly round when it was put away, and you can see it's a football, same as this here. And I didn't cut through down to the pith or cut the pith out, and you can see the end result. I normally, when I get a green bowl and I'm done turning with it, I will set it aside in the shop where I need to walk by it every day, and I'll look at it every day, and I'll leave it there for like a week and watch it and see that if it starts cracking, I'll hit it with some crazy glue, and usually it will save it. And as you return these things, as you're going down into the wood and shaping it to its final dimension, you're going to want the crazy glue close at hand so you can keep that crack from opening up on you. Get it to the rough dimension, and then fill it up and do everything else that you need to do around it, and then go back to it and clean it up for the last time. And I've had really good experience with the CA glues drying to where you really don't see the line. There's just so much going on in a bowl that that you don't really notice it that much. This is a really good example. This is a piece of, yeah, you're right. Thank you. And this, you know, this was a soaking wet piece of wood that, you know, soaked the shop and did its thing. And I'm surprised that it's held up as well as it is, because you can see here, you can still see the pith in it, or just a hair of it. So it's a matter of luck. We talk about proportions and dimensioning, and you know that this is not a hard fast rule that someone has. This is my interpretation of that rule, and I've taken a few pieces of wood, and these are some pieces that I felt were adequate for green drying and for them to stay together. And you can see, there are considerations to be made when you're thinking about doing the turning. You need to get a dimension that you need to go, and you need to back into it, figuring that you need a tenon. You need some room for the bowl to actually sit on something, because you're going to remove the tenon. And if you don't leave a little proportion in there, you're liable to, I figure for, you know, you figure out the diameter of the bowl. And what I do is like, this is, for example, is close to a 10-inch bowl. I like to end up with between 1/4 and 3/8 in my wall thickness when I finish turn these. And so with that in mind, you want your tenon, and I traditionally 1/4, 3/8 on the tenon. I guess if you really want to hold, you would measure to your chuck, and so that the piece almost bottomed out at the bottom of the chuck, and that dimension there on this chuck is a 1/2 inch. So I find that these hold well enough. I don't, you know, everyone wants to use a different kind of chuck, and I'm a snob, I'll admit it. This is a Vic Mark, and it's a very strong chuck. When I tighten that down, I know that wood's going to stay in there. So therefore, I, you know, fly by the seat of my pants, and I do the tenons a little smaller. But you know, with that said, we're figuring a depth there, and then you're going to have a little place for the bowl to set once you've turned it, because you're going to have to get it out of the chuck at some time. I guess the piece that I wanted to bring doesn't show that. So you're going to have let's say you're going to have your 1/2 inch for your chucking, and then you're going to have the thickness of the bowl, let's say, is a 3/8. So now we're up to 7/8, and then you need to leave yourself some room in here to be able to get the bottom finished down to an equal dimension as your sides and things like that. And that's where it really gets tricky, because you really do end up getting carried away. You know, you get in that groove and you're hollowing, and next thing you know, if you're not coming back with your calipers and checking your wall thicknesses all the time, it's crazy how this big dimension will just disappear on you. And I won't tell you how many picture frame bowls I have, and bowls that I've experimented gluing new bottoms on them, so I don't throw away the whole piece of wood. But it happens, and there's just a lot of things going on in your mind at the time, and you can just almost guarantee that at some point in time you're going to go through the bottom or get so close to the bottom that you're going to have a real pretty bowl sitting on the firewood pile when it's burning. But you know, basically, I try to shoot for between 1 inch and 1.25 inches on something this size for a final thickness all the way around. This one varies. It's down to like, that's 15/16 there. And we're out to 1.25 inches here. So it held together through the process. It stayed together well. And it would be a bowl that you could turn. And then this bowl I just cut for to demonstrate, just to demonstrate, this is on an axis, the grain is running, or the pith is running this way if it were in the tree. And this particular one shows you the pith running this way if it were in the tree. So you get a different look of the finishes of or the grain direction of the wood. And as you're turning that wood, you know, you're coming in and your direction's changing on you in many, many ways. And that's why you'll go through, and when you get to a certain point, all of a sudden your tool almost wants to take off on you and run. And then all of a sudden, and it especially happens when you get into the bottom, you can slide across that bottom before you knew what happened. And so it's tool control. But just knowing the reasoning behind it is that because the grain direction is changing. This is a good example of how not to bottom a bowl out. You can see we ran out of room here. You'll never get this foot off of here and have enough meat in this bowl to be able to be successful with it. This one will have a hole in it before you know what happened. And plus you're getting mighty thin here. As far as your chucking would go, this would be a fine candidate to come off the lathe on you. So this is basically firewood. This was done with the one-way coring system, where you've got your blank and you're coring, swinging coring cuts out here. And this was a set of 3 bowls that came out of a bigger blank like this, nesting bowls. And when I was figuring my dimensions, because I still haven't mastered that coring jig. There's a lot of variables to think about when you're setting that up as to how they cut. And it would have been fine if I had remembered that I had put a foot on here still. And so again, this is a fine example of what not to do. This is a piece of cherry that is the other half of this piece of wood that we're going to spin tonight. It was pretty much junk wood, and I'm still not sure if it's not going to end up being junk wood. It was very punky. It was overripe, but I didn't discover that in time to source some green wood. And another reason is that I don't want to turn green wood here tonight. For the one reason, because it's a mess. From that wall to the second row back, there's going to be water. From when you cut into a green piece of wood, and depending on your speed on your lathe, it's everywhere. I hang up a shower curtain on my back wall that I have a wall back here. And I hang up a shower curtain when I turn real green wood, and you always want to stand to the side because you're just going to be soaking wet before the day is over. A lot of fun, but it gets messy. But anyhow, I turned this up just to see if it was going to be successful, and it probably will. It's going to need a little special care, but I did get it to the proper dimensions, and this is what I really wanted to go over that the other bowls didn't show, is that step for putting the foot on, allowing that to be there. So it's in your mind also. And that also, what it does is that when you get ready to take your tenon off, you want to turn and finish everything from the inside out to the outside. And this is my line when I finish. When I'm going to unchuck and go back in and finish the bottom of the bowl off, I'm going to finish up and over this ridge to where when I take the foot off, putting it in a jig, I will come back and bring this section of the bowl, which is not true to the axis of how you've turned your bowl, to get this off. So you're going to be a little bit off. And if you finished all the way over to this edge over here and sanded and put finish on it, you can come up to that line and you can blend it together and not have a seam to where it looks like you went whoops. And because once you start sanding back into the bowl to try to correct when you've gone over that line, you might as well sand the whole bowl off because you're going to refinish the whole thing. And that's difficult to do when you're in a cold jaw that's grabbing it from the outside edge and holding it on that outside edge. It's impossible to do. And you end up having to do it by hand and sand everything by hand. So, that's just a consideration to have and to keep in your mind about when you're laying out something. And this will be a successful bowl if the wood stays together. I will probably just put a light coat of CA glue over all the rough grain while it's drying and just let that set. And it also, what it does is that it'll seal up that end grain and keep it from wanting to deteriorate even more. I'll keep it dry and stuff. So it works out pretty good that way. I guess we can make a few chips here. I was thinking about when I like using face plates. I feel very secure with them. There's a lot of talk out there about what's correct and things like that. I found that, for most of the things, unless I get over like a 16-inch or something like that, I'm just using a simple 1.25 inch screw. I'm filling up all the holes with them. And I've never even come close to having anything, even with a bad stick or something like that, come off of one of these face plates. So I feel confident in doing that. I like my face plates to be aluminum. It's very forgiving when you get in there and get real close and have a whoops moment. And it doesn't take the end of the chisel off or anything like that.
How does the size of the faceplate matter depending on the size of the wood?
It probably helps. If you are getting into that bigger range up, most of us don't have the capacity, this is a 14-inch, 18-inch. Okay. This is a pretty large lathe. A lot of us are, only 8-inch or 10 maybe or something like that. I have a gap bed lathe. Which is, I've got a 16, which I can remove the gap and go to 32. It limits you, the gap is only a certain width, so it limits you with the depth of the bowl that you can turn. But I find as I'm getting a little older that I don't throw 32 and 36-inch pieces of wood around as easily as I used to. But anyhow. This is how I like to prepare stock. We show in the beginning shot of, here we have just the log section. And when I was cutting this out, I was looking at it to see this branch coming back in that it healed over and knotted up and looked a little burly, thinking that would add some interest to the bowl as I was doing it, and whether I decided I was going to leave it on the side of the bowl or put it on the bottom of the bowl or however, I hadn't worked that out quite yet. But what ended up with this log is that it ended up being a problem child, and it had more rod in it than I thought. And it's actually, that log is this piece of wood right here. And the branch that you see coming in is right here. So this side here had some serious decay on it. And, you can repair that decay with fillers, and you can actually go in and put epoxy and stuff like that. And a lot of people color it and make it look pretty artistic. And there's a guy on YouTube, Sprague Woodworking. I think he's out of Canada. He does a lot of that. He looks for really messed up wood and does amazing things with it. Okay, so that's that same log, and this was the deterioration that I was talking about that wasn't pretty stable. You can see here that I find the center, and a rule of thumb is, and I know every one of you guys, people know this, a bowl can be no larger than the diameter of the log. So if you're looking at the log in its natural state, and you've got the other half here, you measure across here, and that's the maximum, no matter how you cut it, that's the maximum yield you're going to get out of that piece of wood. So what I do with them is that I will take and I will get this dimension, find my center, and then come back from that center that I'm thinking about, maybe I've got a crack too far this way or a crack too far. So in the log, you can move the center where you want it to be, and then turn around and let's roll on to the next slide, please. That's where I'm doing the centering. We could go to the next one, please. You can see there, this is what it is. And the reason this is set up this way is that I have a circle jig on my bandsaw. And what I do with it is, and I'll show a picture of that in a second, is that I drill a larger hole because, let's go on to the next one. It's going to be easier if we can see this. Okay, this is just how I went about mounting my, I drilled a couple of quarter-inch holes in my castings, found a place between the webs, not to stress anything, and just put a tap in, tapped them, and then bolted these 2 blocks of wood on here, and did the same in the back for an outfeed table. Go to the next, please. And just took a piece of scrap wood and put a T-track in there, and put a quarter 20 bolt in there, which is a 7/16 head, which fits perfectly in the T-track, and then put a nut down on top of that as my adjusting lock. And that way I can take this pin and I can move it wherever my center mark is. I can move that jig in or out to get the proper dimension on the bowl. And so again, we're working with a roughly 13-inch. So I'm at 6.5 on my center here. So what I've done is I first drill a 1/2-inch hole in here, which accommodates for the nut that you see here, this section, and then the inside I drill it like 3/8 because the actual bolt itself is 1/4 inch. So this will just, it's a little tricky to line it up, but you just kind of get there and get down there and get it on there. And then you've got the blank sitting there. We can go to the next, please. Okay, that's just showing how I set up the distance I'll go from the saw blade, the cutting edge of the saw blade, out to my 6.5. This is not to scale. And I'll center my bolt, and I'll leave myself on this side. I'll leave myself like 1/8 to 1/4 inch wider. So when I put this up on the table, it's going to sit up on the table like this. And our bandsaw blade is sitting here. And so I have a little bit of room to adjust it to get this to sit down onto that bolt and stay centered and not put a bind on the thing, because you've got to remember the bandsaw blade is set here and I'm clear, so I can turn the saw on and stuff like that. And you see what we're going to do here is we're going to cut the ends off of this. It's going to come back here and not cut anything, but it's going to take this section and this section off. And so, and there's an example of it.
What kind of blade do you use on your
It's a good question. It's a 1/2-inch, 3/2 per inch. A rule of thumb for that is the less teeth that you have, the better the wood clears, because it's got more place to stay in between the gullets of the blades, and it evacuates out of the cut, and it doesn't heat up and cause your blades to dull out quicker and stuff like that. This piece of wood was fun because it's I've added 3/4 inch to the top of my table, so that takes away my blade clearance height, and I find myself sometimes having to come in here where the blade is going to and cut the bark off and cut down into the wood to create a clearance to get it to be able to spin underneath my guides. And this piece of wood was that case. I had to cut a little bit off the top. And another reason why the bark is not on here is because I don't like to make a big mess in somebody else's house, because it just goes everywhere. And plus, it's probably the dirtiest part, and it consumes your tools. There's dirt in that bark. No matter how well you try to take care of it, there's dirt in there. You're gonna sharpen probably 3 or 4 times before you get the bark off.
Any trouble cutting wet wood with that bandsaw? You have to cut the blade off when you get through cutting, or it's
I wipe my table down when I'm done. I haven't, and if it has, it's, you turn it on and you put a piece of wood to it and it's clean again. Yeah, yeah. This step right here probably saves 40 minutes, 50 minutes turning, trying to get these ears off of here and here, because it's so far out of round. When you put this on, it's not round by any means, but it's rounder, and you're not, you're not exposing your hands to all this flying wood out here with the sharp edges and things like that, and you slip and you've got a problem. And also I will take and just roughly cut with a chainsaw here and here, just to bring it more into proportion to where these are the only real points of contact until you start getting into the round realm that are going to be an issue with it. And so it makes it a lot easier to keep the lathe in tune, and you're not chasing the lathe around the room, because it does vibrate a lot. Let's go on to the next one, please. Okay, that's a good representation of the end result. It's going to be so much easier on you. And I know a lot of you guys have probably thrown just a blank up there that's not been pre-cut, and had the experience of how much aggravation it is to get it to even start smoothing out to where you feel comfortable to increase your speed and stuff like that. So let's go take a peek at the next one. Okay, we're up to speed here. This is the chuck mounting process that I go through, and it's not anything. I have my pre-existing hole that I can see through the chuck here, and therefore, I mean, I just roughly put it in there because there's nothing truly round about that. These are 1.25 inches. I think they're number 9s or something, but they're just exterior grade screws. You can see that this is sitting pretty good. A lot of times this cut won't be, speaking of the cut, I failed to mention this. I do this with a chainsaw. I have a 20-inch blade on a pretty heavy chainsaw. And again, your best friend when you do this is that no matter what chain you buy, I mean, I buy steel equipment. They come graded. There's a little yellow and green and red sticker that's on the box. And the green sticker is more or less made for state safety in mind for the inexperienced user. It's got a set of teeth in there that are limiters that will not allow that saw to get too dangerous. Doesn't want to kick back. It doesn't want to jump around on you. But it also, when you're asking a saw to rip, which is what we're doing, we're ripping through this wood. We're not cross-cutting the grain at all. We're ripping completely. You don't want those breakers to be limiting, because it's number one, it's limiting the chips that can get up in there. It's going to cause your chain to bind up quickly. You're not going to get a smooth cut, and it's also going to, it's just going to be very difficult and hard on the clutch on your saw and stuff like that. It's just asking the saw to do more than it should. And what I found is that you can buy a chain that the logging people use. And that's where the color coding comes in on the boxes. If it's got that yellow sticker or orange or yellow sticker on it, it means that it doesn't have that extra set of safety on it. It's made to cut. It's made to do its job by someone that knows what they're doing. And so therefore, I try to buy, same as I said with the bandsaw, but try to buy the least number of teeth in the chain. I mean, normally a chain is like 60 or 72 teeth or something, a 20-inch blade, let's say, is 72 teeth. These that I get are 68. And it makes all the difference in the world. I mean, you put the other one on and it won't cut, and you put this one on, and pretty soon you've got a ribbon of chips that are long and stringy. And you need to pay attention to keeping the saw feeding clearly, because it'll plug up the saw. I've had it get up and to where it's plugged up the bar itself, and just the saw stops. It matters the number of teeth that you're dealing with. But anyhow, this is a nice clean cut. It's flat. My faceplate is not moving around. It's not rocking. If you get and you want to bolt it on, let's say you've got that much of a gap, you want to find a shim and get it underneath there, a piece of wood, and back it up to hold it, because you don't want to put the stress on your aluminum faceplate by over torquing it that half inch, because it's going to twist this, and this is going to become no good real quick. So it's just kind of important, and I don't lock the first couple down. I just kind of get them set. That way I can move it around a little if I want to. And I've never experienced having problems removing these. You do want to be conscious of when you are doing it and you're doing it like this, because the piece of wood's going to want to, when you get down to that last, taking that last screw out, it's going to want to walk around on you. You'll notice, or you might not notice, there's a couple of set screws here on the chuck, and they're there for a reason. If you're going to be turning in reverse, a chuck will come off. A faceplate, anything will come off. You want to set those down. And what they do is they go in against the headstock and they lock the chuck in. We're not going to be turning in reverse today at all. So when we're turning in this direction, there's physically no way. As you can see, it's spinning reasonably well there. It's not out of balance a lot or anything like that. So it's not going to be difficult. And that's where all this other preparation work comes in. It just makes your life so much easier. Yeah. What I'm going to do here is that I'm just going to come in and poke a little bit of a hole in here to have an easier start place, to where when I start doing my rounding, I just have a foundation here to work off of instead of bouncing around and getting catches and all that kind of stuff. It just makes it a little easier to get in there and get this material removed. You don't need much speed here. We're turning like 130 something here now, and you just want to go in easy. It's important to, especially for new turners, and I guess technically for all turners, to put a center in here and support your work with the center. It's a safety thing. I guess we all do what we want to do when we want to do it, but for purposes of demonstration, I'm going to put one on here. This is just an adapter. It goes from Morse taper number 2 to Morse taper number 2. And what I like about this is that it keeps my tailstock that 3 or 4 inches back, so you're not getting crowded with it when you're turning. And so basically that just first thing I always do before I turn the lathe on is give it a spin. Make sure that your tools are clear. I mean, your stops and your tool rests and things like that are clear. I've preset this tool rest to my desired height, which is center line of the bowl. I normally will do that just by taking this, put the tool that I'm going to be using on the rest and line it with the center of that. Okay. Okay, I've got my hand on the machine and I'm feeling, and what I'm feeling for is vibration. You really don't want to get too carried away. Like I can feel that that's starting to just want to wobble a bit. So it's a good starting point there. I normally will go after anything, you know, you've got it back and forth with a lot of air in here right now that you're going to be free cutting. And what I like to do is I like to come in on these high spots and just round them over just a little bit, just so that if something happens and I slip a little bit or something, that I'm not getting cut with a sharp piece of wood. It's kind of got a rounded edge on it a little bit. And I don't pay full price for sorbet gouges. I buy them used. You were giving these to us for $20 a piece, so that's and I get a lot of use out of these. I really enjoy them. But so we're going to just really trying to do here is just get that roughness out of there. Listen, you can hear we're making contact in 2 or 3 spots now. So we're getting a place for that bevel to actually sit in and rub. What I'm trying to get here is to get all that dead air space so we can have a continuous cut so we can really get in there and start removing some material. This tool might be a little much for this lathe. But you can see we're getting to where we're almost getting round here now. And the cuts just become easier and easier as you go, once you do get to round. You really do want to keep your tool rest pretty close to your workpiece. It just supports your chisel really very well. And what what I'm finding now is that with all the debris and stuff that was on the outside of this bowl, this chisel is not cutting well at all. So it's time to give it a quick sharpening, and probably not going to have time to talk about my favorite sharpening system. But I like this specifically for its repeatability and ease of setup and the ability to go back to it. And then it has all your desired settings for just about any turning tool that you want to have. You have corresponding holes set up over here to be able to set a plate up and be able to consistently, like when you go in and do your bevel grind to start off, you would have your table here. And I'm just going to basically show you the sharpening of the bowl gouge and how I go through that. I think that these systems right now with all the attachments are probably around $500, between $5 and $6. I find myself going to, and this is not a paid advertisement or anything. I like Packer Woodwork out in Tryon, North Carolina. The customer service is phenomenal. They get their orders out quickly. I actually have met the owner. He's a very nice gentleman. And again, I don't know whether this is to just preset your depth. But it's you set your depth like you would with any stop block that you use in your systems, and you get your proper depth. And this is a preset angle also. As you can see, this gouge was pretty sharp when I started, but it's only a matter of that's a 120 grit belt on there. I like it because it puts a pretty aggressive back bead on there that does the cutting very well. And that's all it takes to resharpen. It's pretty quick. You can remember I was fighting this before, and now it's just we're just now starting to get through that punky wood and get into something that's a little solid. Well, this is the point where you get to that, whether you want to decide whether you're going to put a rim on it or not, and that you want to leave the most amount of material there to do so. We still haven't gotten through this little punky piece of spalted wood yet. So I'm going to clean it up just a little bit more, but I'm going to leave this thick for right now, just so until we kind of see where we're going with this. We've just about got it down to some pretty nice solid wood. We need to clean up this bottom section a little more. And that's coming out pretty good. I'm starting to think about my dimensions of depth and things like that, and what this will be. I can see that we've got to get much shallower. We've still got a lot of wood here that's not stable that we need to remove. This is black cherry. Yeah, we're still getting into those catches. There's the result of a catch right there. You can see. And that's about where the wood starts getting a little more solid. So I'm going to try to trim a little bit more of that out of there.
because of that rotten wood, you can't get a place to hook a good bevel to. Part of the reason for a lot of that catching is that I was too low. I think the tool rest had settled down and being pounded down a little bit. Let's see if that helps it a little. Come back off the tails out over here. Take it off. What are we doing? Okay, I'm feeling pretty confident that we're into some pretty good wood here now. So we can start thinking about developing the foot. I'm going to shape just this outside corner just a little bit more. Not trying to get any kind of beauty here or anything right at this point in time, because it's all going to warp and twist on you anyhow. So, but I'm happy about the stability of the wood now. It doesn't seem to be moving, so let's cut a tenon on there real quick and hopefully have some time to get the inside of it hollowed. Okay, you want to remember that you're starting to make your judgment calls as to the depth of the bowl, is how it's going to work out, and your proportions to that. So I know I'm going to put at least a 3/8 tenon on here. So I'm just going to go in and roughly just knock that out so I have a parameter to go to. What I try to do is that I try to, they say that your chuck has the maximum gripping power when it's at its closed position. It's because you don't have that extra length on the threads that has ability to loosen and move and stuff like that. So you want to keep your tenon, reasonably small. And you also want to leave it big enough that you have some meat left to return it when you go to second chuck the bowl back up, because I would say that a tenon that size would make me happy. So just roughly, we've got a 5-inch bowl. So we work back from that. We want to have an inch thickness at least with this bowl to dry it out and feel comfortable about it not moving around. So you're working off of 4 inches now. So let's assume we're going to put a 3/8 inch deep foot on this bowl. It's pretty close to where we are now. Now I want to think about the foot that I'm going to leave on here, the dimension of the foot. So we know that this is going to get cleaned up and get smooth and flattened out, but we know that we want to stay higher than this at this point. So that's going to give us a good piece of wood to start with, and we can shape it as we go with the bowl. I'm going to just take this outside corner. I find that a pleasing look. We're well into some really nice wood here. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time making this very, very pretty because we're not going to have time to do much of anything here if I do. This surface and this surface in here want to be flat so your chuck can get up to it and sit flat on the piece of wood because it's going to hold it straighter for you. So let me just real quickly take a little off this outside edge here. Okay, so I'm not 100% satisfied with that, but for time's sake, it's going to work for us. What we want to do now is we want to chuck up, and this is a little device that I found. Find a lot of little helpful trinkets with McMaster Carr. They're a kind of machine supply place, and what this does is that you can use this to chuck back and forth, and what it does is that it helps the piece stay in the same axis that it's in now. And this just sits up in here. And it'll just allow you to come up on that and make it easier to chuck up. You're not fumbling around with it or anything like that. McMaster Carr. They're an industrial supply company. They're on the internet. You can see here now that my chuck is, my outside of my jaws are up against the bottom of the bowl, and we've got pretty good contact in there. And I don't know what the technical name for it is. It's just got the 1 1/4/8 thread on the to a Morse taper number 2. No, you can't use it to turn with or anything. No. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Uh-oh. I find that little jig very helpful when you're doing the second turning, because it really helps you get it really lined up very nicely. I didn't want to bring my normal everyday faceplate for the simple reason that I'll tell you a little secret. I don't ever take my chuck off my regular chuck off the lathe. I would mount this exactly the same and put it in this chuck. And then when I get done, I just take it off and put the bowl on. You guys are getting too critical on me now. Yes, I did. I cleaned it up. I blew it out. Chuck maintenance, you should probably take it apart and take the jaws out about once a year and clean it and lubricate it. They're really simple to do. The first time you do it, you're going to freak out, but you just basically unscrew it all the way and the jaws will fall out. You want to just pay attention to which one falls out first and make a mental note, because when you put them back together, you want to put them back in that reverse order.
Okay, these are some bowls that were green when they were turned, and actually this is what they are after they've dried. This is what they end up looking like.
When you started off, you're talking about one that still has some pith in it that turned out shaped like a football.
Mm-hmm.
Can you fix that?
Oh yeah, because when you go back to it's like this one here, you can see. You just gotta, like, the first 4 or 5 days of most critical time of when the cracking, because it's losing the most water right then. And if you catch it like I have here with some super glue, this one is not actually the pith. This one is a little branch that's coming through that's causing that. And this is the same here. There's another branch right here, and that's what happened with this one. But this one clearly was I didn't get deep enough into the pith, and that's where all the stresses are being released as it dries. But yes, this is totally salvageable, because you're gonna remove 2/3 to 3/4 of the mass of this bowl. And if you do find any issues going down the road, you can treat them with the super glue as you go. Okay, that's a piece of this sister wood. That's the finished product. That's my apple bowl. It sits on the counter all day holding apples, but that was, and this could be that same bowl. I mean, it's got the same, if you look at it, it's got the same basic shape right now. It would be a little bit deeper, but pretty much it'd be a mirror image of what that bowl looks like. Bowls don't stay around very long. This is just some of my finished work. This is a piece of, I think this is Bradford pear. This one Gary will find interesting if he's still asleep or awake.
I think he's asleep.
Okay, but he brought this piece of wood, I think, from Minnesota, and I got a piece of it, and it's very beautiful walnut. But talk about going football. I got carried away with this and started turning it before it was dry, and it was beautiful when I shut the lathe off, and the next morning it looked like this. So that's a prime example of how not to turn a piece of wood. This is some walnut that you've got a half a truckload of. This is some of that. My finish of preference is shellac, and then either a coat of wax or a coat of water-based poly, wipe-on water-based poly. And I find that it holds up well. It seals the bowls up, and it's quick and it's easy. And I also, none of these are representative of this, but I also like to spray finish. And that adds a whole nother dimension. In shellac, you can spray it and 2 minutes later, give it a rough sand and spray it again, and you can build up. You can go from no finish to a completely finished bowl in about 2 hours. So it just speeds up the process. Well, I'd like to thank everyone very much for having me. And I hope I showed you a little of something. I'm not a presenter by any means. But that's just some of my thoughts about how I go about doing it and trying to, probably 45 minutes, and this would be a product that would be ready to set aside and let dry.
Finish it, come back to the next meeting and show it to us.
Well, that'll be a year from now. There's conflicting views about how long to leave them, but I find at least 8 months, and I don't do any of the things that everybody says that you have to do to preserve a bowl. I mean, basically what you see is I put them on a shelf, and that's where they go, and they do what they do. And I don't throw a whole lot of them away. They say you're supposed to, get them down to 8-10% moisture content or whatever, but I don't even own a moisture meter. I pick it up and it starts feeling light for the species that it is, and I'll just make some cuts on it and see how it's acting. Yeah, there you go. Basically, people do use a scale and weigh them. Yeah, thank you.